Hello, faithful listener. I'm your host, David Perry. Welcome to the Arbitrarium podcast. Today our guest is Garrett Harriman, local man about house and scourge of the insect menace. Okay, so our topic today is going to be social media. Garrett's been absent from Facebook for about 2.5 years. We're going to kind of jump into that and start with a few questions about why you might have left and what it was like while you were gone and what... Now you're back, so I also want to know what made you come back and whether or not you think it was a good decision. So we'll start with why. Why did you leave in the first place?
Well, hello, I'm Garrett. If this is your first time listening, the reason I left was I was working as a security guard at the time, and I noticed that I was just wasting sometimes just dozens of minutes, sometimes an hour, just scrolling through Facebook. And at the time, that would have been August 2018 at that time. And getting into really just pointless political debates. There wasn't really a chance of changing anyone's mind. This was, I wouldn't say the start of really the wide division between people, but it was definitely getting into full swing at that point. So for my own sanity, I just decided, you know what, I'm going to drop this for a week. See what happened, and then a week turned into 2.5 years.
So you mentioned that it seemed like you weren't going to be able to change anyone's mind. Was that a prime motivator for being on social media?
For getting on social media in the first place? No. Getting on social media in the first place was getting a date. Shit, way back in the day. I was in the Army, so only way I could really keep in touch with people was started with MySpace, and then went to Facebook.
Okay, but then, I mean, you were on it for much longer than that, and you were married when you left.
Right. So I had just gotten married when I left.
So what, well, you had been in a relationship for years at that point. So during that time, what was your reason for just kind of popping into Facebook or whatever social media? Primarily Facebook. I don't think you were particularly active on Twitter or somewhat on Tumblr, but not even really that much there.
2009, I posted on Tumblr regularly, but again, that was to try and impress a girl.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Yeah, well, I was a young man who was deprived of any kind of physical contact for a year in Afghanistan, so...
Shit, I didn't even go to Afghanistan, and I felt that way.
Well, try going to Afghanistan. You'll have a whole new appreciation for getting the good touch. Or the bad touch in the form of a rifle bullet or something like that, but...
Well, that's not... See, that went south real fast. I was still okay with bad touch, and then I found out what you meant by bad touch.
I mean, to each their own. Some people pay for that interaction.
Never had to pay for it, thankfully. Of course, I never actually got it.
All right, so... As far as why I stayed on... Habit. Partly it was habit. Partly is I was looking to see, hey, what is everyone talking about? And about August of 2018, I kind of stopped caring what other people were talking about to some extent. It seemed to be the same banal stuff over and over and over again.
Like what? What was just some things that you just kept seeing that was just kind of...
A lot of it was political.
Right.
And it got to the point where instead of like reading what someone was posting, I would see who was posting it and it's just like, okay, I know what direction they're going.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you would have stayed longer if more of them were posting things that you agreed with, or would that have been worse?
I couldn't say.
Mm-hmm. I've known you for a long time, and I could go either way on that.
Yeah, I could go either way on that too. And I've known myself for a while. I say, I hope I have.
I'm getting there. I'm trying to figure myself out.
Yeah, well.
But that philosophical topic is a good topic for another day.
Human. What is?
I'm writing that down. Human. What is? Subtitle. What do? All right.
So, yeah, it was a combination of a bunch of different things as to why I got off. I kind of stopped caring what everyone else was talking about because I already kind of figured I knew what they were going to say, judging by what they had already done, what they've already posted about, the conversations I'd had with them.
Habits they build up as far as the types of things they talk
Right,
about.
how they speak,
Yeah.
how they present their arguments. And then...
Wait a minute, I was one of those people. But we are, immediate contact.
Right. And yeah, I said, all right, I'm going to hop off this for a week, see how things go. And they went well. The first week was a little bit trying because I had to resist the urge to pick it up and fall into that old habit. But I started doing that on a Thursday, and I'd say by next Friday, I was good.
It's getting past the addiction phase.
If you want to call it addiction, I'd say it's just habit. You know.
Well, I mean,
Like
you're a self-acknowledged extreme fidgeter, I would say. Maybe not extreme, but you definitely fidget a lot. So the idea that it was something that would keep you distracted when there was nothing else to do, like, is that when you found that you were most likely to pick up your phone?
That's probably part of it.
Yeah.
I didn't do like a deep self-analysis as to why I did it. I just kind of decided, I'm going to try this.
You're missing out, man. There's a lot of anxiety to be had.
I'm sure. I've had enough anxiety.
All right, so what would you say have were the benefits of being absent from social media for as long as you were?
My God, the amount of things that you can get done when you're not bothered trying to scroll through Facebook for hours on end. You can actually get the dishes done pretty quick.
Yeah.
So that's a plus. Other things that I'd pick up Facebook and just kind of ignore, like the cat box, or hey, maybe I should sweep the floor or something. It actually got under my skin, so I was motivated to go do it. Got more reading done. I mean, I don't read anything but
more productive reading, maybe.
Novels.
Right.
We'll go with novels. I don't read a lot of things that most people would consider, I don't know, constructive. I'm a sci-fi addict. I will admit that is an addiction. So I got a lot of sci-fi reading done. Also some scientific reading in the form of like Wait But Why articles.
What was that?
In the form of Wait But Why articles.
Okay, so contact clues, I'm assuming that those are articles that are about something that is the case, but why?
It's more like, okay, here's the thing, and here is an article that will take you 8 to 9 hours to read.
Oh, okay.
Wait But Why is the website.
Gotcha. They're not paying us for that.
Unless you want to.
From the sound of it, I would be fine with advertising.
Well, they have to get in line. We have a whole host of other sponsors.
Yes. Very, very, very
lucrative. We've made millions
lucrative
off of
and earnest fake sponsors. I know that they're lucrative because I made them up, so,
So, other things, other good things about getting off Facebook. I became more tolerant of other opinions.
Really?
Honestly, yeah.
Okay.
Because I'm not talking to people online. I have to talk to people in the real world, which means I can't be my worst self.
Yeah, that's a really, really, really good point to make. This is going to seem like kind of a simple question, but I mean, maybe starting that way is a good idea. When you're talking about being your worst self, why do you think people tend to lean that way on social media?
Well, you're on social media. You're incentivized to kind of be to stand out. And the easiest way to do that is be shocking. You know, that meme of Steven Crowder sitting at a table.
Oh yeah,
and the change my mind thing. It's like that. Anytime you make a post on social media, that's kind of what you're doing. This is my stance. And you're kind of daring someone to change your mind if it is in any way political. Or hell, even if it's a somewhat milquetoast opinion, It's almost like you're daring someone to come after you.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of standing in your front yard with a megaphone.
Right.
And I always find that funny because that's the way I've always sort of viewed it when it comes to like having a Facebook or a Twitter or something. Whatever you post on those things, that's exactly what you're doing. You're standing in your front yard with a megaphone, and you got people that will complain when someone who is passing by decides to turn and say, "Wait a minute, wait a minute." And then, you get people that get defensive about that. Like, well, this is my space. No, if you were inside your house talking to your family, that's your space. Mm-hmm. You came out here with a megaphone.
Right.
So.
And at least in my own experience, I'd post something, I don't know, 2A related, Second Amendment.
Yep.
Or my own, I'm a radical Heinleinian politically.
Explain that a bit. A radical Heinleinian.
I'm going to do one better than explain it. Read Starship Troopers. You'll get an understanding.
Well, give us a little bit of something if that's going to be anywhere near a topic of discussion.
Basically, the idea that if you want to have a vote, well, you better earn it.
Okay.
You're going to value it, and the vote's going to be... You're more likely to wield it more responsibly because you had to earn it.
Right. Okay.
Instead of just voting for free stuff, wait a minute, I had to suffer for this.
Mm-hmm.
But without going further into that, I'd post something Second Amendment related, or I'd post something of my own political beliefs, and I would get upset when people disagreed with me.
Yeah.
Because chances are I was kind of spoiling for a fight, and I was spoiling for a lot of fights when I was on social media. I got more out of the argument than I did out of concordance of thought.
Well, I'd say that there's a genuine virtue to that, but then there's also a flip side to that same coin, which is, well, I'd say the genuine virtue is that if you're looking for dissenting opinions, you're more likely to...
I didn't say I was looking for dissenting opinions. I said I was looking for a fight.
I'm getting there. If you're looking for dissenting opinions, then you're welcoming more information than what your confirmation biases would generally allow for. That's a good thing.
Right, yeah.
But then there's the flip side of that, which is you're looking for a fight. And if you're looking for a fight, you're motivated to win and not motivated to learn something.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I was kind of fooling myself, thinking, no, I'm in this to spread my message and to learn. No, I was ignoring that entire side, that second part there.
You think you were less likely to indulge the truth from outside sources?
I'd say if someone brought to me a source that was, I wouldn't say beyond reproach, but solid, then I would definitely consider it. But the arguments that people get into on Facebook, there's very little source citing. Mm-hmm. It's mostly, well, this news source says this. Well, I don't trust that news source. It must be wrong.
Now, how much of that do you think, even maybe on your part?
And this was 2.5 years ago.
Right.
We'll get into what I've found since I've been back on over the past week.
Yeah. When it comes to those types of citing sources and those types of things, when it comes to other people, but even in reference to yourself, what do you think? Do you think that doing those types of things is more of an ethical responsibility, like an ethical discourse responsibility, or is it more a tactic or maybe some sort of virtue signaling that, look, I'm doing argument the right way and you're not?
Little column A, little column B.
I figured that's probably what the answer was going to be. Do you think it's more...
You can do the right thing for the wrong reasons and vice versa.
Okay, maybe I shouldn't ask this question because it's really a leading question. I know what I'm getting at, so I'll just say it. Well, I thought I knew what I was getting at, and then I lost it. Yep, totally lost it.
Good job.
Yeah. I'm not the best interviewer. I tend to lose my train of thought pretty damn quick. We got to get we got to really, really dig in on a topic. Okay. All right, so we were talking about...
You're like Virgil from the from the core.
God, it's been
You
so
seen
long
that
since I've
movie?
seen that. I have, but
You know, it gets more stable the deeper it goes.
oh yes, that's a really good analogy, actually. As long as I'm
You
up
seem
toward the surface
surprised.
level, yeah, I never thought of it, but yeah, if I'm up at the surface level of a discussion, my mind's just like there's like some sort of like superficial anxiety there, like I don't know what I'm going to say next or what we're going to talk about next. We haven't gotten deep enough to really explore, so, but once we get there, it's like okay, now we're in the zone.
Right.
So yeah. Which is why I was concerned about being the host of any episodes. It's like, no, just let me walk into a conversation, right? Let me do that because I can manage if we're already like, ass deep in a conversation about.
Pretty far along as it is, man.
All right, so we'll move on just a little bit then. What would you say were the drawbacks of being off of social media, if any?
Cultural references. I would always be on the outside of memes. On some things, I was, late to the party as far as news.
Mm-hmm.
I can't give any specific examples right now, but it happened. And it's more like cultural news, which everything's kind of becoming cultural, political news these days.
Oh, that actually leads us into an interesting thing. So, you said you felt like you were behind on news by being off of, we'll say social media, but more specifically Facebook.
Well, I
with
found other sources of news.
Well, that's what I was going to say. There are other sources of news, but you still felt like you were behind on news.
On certain things.
Okay.
On certain things. And specifically like certain stories that might go around. Where I'd start going for news, they would cover relevant things to what that particular presenter was interested in.
Mm-hmm.
I had a less broad exposure. So, I found out about, God, who was it? Someone important who died in 2018. I found out about that a week later.
There were a few of those, probably. I'm not sure which one that would be specifically in reference to.
Mm-hmm.
Time's going fast. If somebody said
Yeah.
died in 2018, I think Robin Williams. No, he actually died a lot longer than that.
I was about to say David Bowie, but that happened in 2016.
God, it's been that long.
It has been. 5 years.
Oh, man. Well, shit.
Anyway.
I think in when I go to edit this, I'm going to have just like space oddities sort of slowly creep in. And then bam, back. I'm going to cut that part out because it's not funny. But, yeah.
Right. You explained the joke. All right. So other disadvantages that I was running into with being on social media, or not being on social media. I still kept Facebook Messenger. That's how I kept in touch with all my friends.
Right.
They'd post something, hey, I think you might like this, and then it would be a link to Facebook.
Yeah. And we'd have to post things in the group chat so that you would see them even though everybody else already saw them on regular Facebook.
Right. So, felt like a little bit more of a burden there.
Nah, nobody cared.
As an inverse of the, I had to be more accepting of other people's opinions as the benefit of it. As an inverse of that, I became less willing to talk about my own openly with other people.
You became less willing to talk about your own?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because listening to their opinion is like, okay, this is kind of pretty middle of the road. Or sometimes I'd run across someone who was other side, and it's like, okay, no matter what I say, I'm going to be the radical here.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it seems like people are more keyed up now to be on the lookout for dissenting or opinions, or they kind of go into conversations thinking that, assuming there's going to be disagreement and that they're going to be in disagreement with someone that they're talking to. Like, it's almost like a prerequisite for getting into a discussion on Facebook. It's like, I know that I'm not going to like what this person says, even if you might actually agree with it under less intense circumstances, right? All right, we're going to get back to that in just a minute, but now we're going to go to a word from our sponsors.
Doe, John, OmniCorp Unlimited presents Doe, John Automobiles. If it's Doe, John, it can drive. If it's Doe, John, it's our product.
Okay, so when we left off, we were talking about basically conflict on social media, and that's actually a pretty good place to sort of move into. My question is, when you're on Facebook, and I do the same thing, what types of things I post. When you're on Facebook and you're looking to, we'll be generous here and say, looking to start a conversation. We talk about how people, they go into these things almost expecting conflict, and I think the types of people.
There's no almost about it.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to Facebook, if you're going to engage in that type of social discourse, a lot of the people who are going to be the most likely to respond to you, especially if what you're saying is provocative, whether it's intentional or not, with you, I think it's either or, but usually probably at least somewhat provocative. They go into it because they're actually kind of looking for that. Like you mentioned that's pretty much what you were looking for. You were itching for a fight with somebody, to sort of flex your intellectual muscles. Mm-hmm. But when you did that, how often did you come away from that feeling better than when you went into it?
Depends on what you mean by better.
Just in general, did you feel
like I'd accomplished something? No.
Okay.
Like I well represented my opinion. Sometimes. Mm-hmm. It really does depend on what you mean by better on that.
Well, did you find that you were more anxious when you stepped away? Or when you stepped away, did you feel like, okay, I got what I wanted out of it?
I wouldn't say anxious. I would say stressed.
Okay.
But
that is a distinction to make.
Stress can be good or bad.
Right.
Because sometimes I'd walk away with it like, yeah, got him.
Right.
Other times I'd be thinking about, okay, I didn't do that right. It was a post-battle assessment is a good way to put it. Thinking about how things went, what I could have done better. I really tried to avoid going back and editing what I'd said. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, my rules on that. I never delete comments, and if I edit something I've said, it's only for spelling errors and grammatical purposes.
Right.
I have a very strict rule about that for myself. But so what would you say that you gain from those types of experiences then? What's the benefit? What are you getting out of it?
It can be fun.
Okay.
That's certainly.
What's fun about it?
What's fun about it?
Mm-hmm. If it stresses you out at least a reasonable amount of the time, do you like the stress?
I can. Okay. I've done martial arts. I've had actual violence visited upon me, mm-hmm. and in that kind of this mental and verbal sparring on Facebook. It is. I wouldn't call it violence, but the same kind of thing happens there. If you're in a Taekwondo tournament or a HEMA bout or something like that, it's violence by consent. Even if you lose, you can kind of feel better about yourself afterward. You feel like you might have accomplished something.
You feel like it's sort of you can correct me if my terminology isn't really that useful, but something like a warrior mentality. I wouldn't say it's complex. That's not fair. But like a warrior mentality, like I'm going to go in and I'm going to beat this person, and then I'm going to come out and there's going to be something good about that. Like I will feel like I've done something.
Maybe.
Okay.
I mean, physical conflict and Facebook arguments are two very different things, but some of the same rules apply, I suppose.
I mean, psychologically, I would imagine that there are quite a few similar things taking place.
You have to learn how to attack while still defending yourself, mm-hmm. and in that case, you're attacking their position while defending your own.
When you're doing it, what would you say is your focal effort? Like, you've heard me talk about how important reason and truth and those types of things are to me, and that's an easy thing to virtue signal, but what would you say your end goal is?
That would depend on what what conversation or argument did I just end up in. It might be, hey, could your point isn't that clear. Could you revise this, please? Work on your diction, buddy.
Right.
Or it might be a position that I find personally reprehensible and therefore wish to annihilate.
How often would you say you find yourself sacrificing any noble pursuit of knowledge in favor of argumentative tactics to win?
70-30.
In favor of which?
In favor of winning.
So 70 in favor of winning despite the truth.
I would say never despite the truth.
Okay.
But underhanded tactics. Okay, yeah, that's gonna happen. Especially, I kind of let my opponent set the rules of engagement.
Okay, let's talk about that. Actually, let's talk about tactics, and when we're dealing with social media discussions or arguments, as they pretty much always end up.
Right.
What are some of the things? Let's see. Do we want to go that you employ, or no? Let's go the other way. It's easier to complain. What are some of the argumentative tactics that you've seen people levy against you that maybe impressed you, but particularly frustrate you?
Now, bear in mind, since I've been back on Facebook, I haven't done this.
Right.
For a very good reason. So all this is coming off information that is at least 2.5 years old. The tactic that I saw used most often was straw man.
Oh yeah.
I'd say something, they'd build up my position into something that, of course, everyone would object to, and then use that as...
Spoiler alert now that you're back on social media. It's gotten worse.
Really? Color me surprised.
Yeah.
So, straw man, or the inverse of that, accusing my argument of making them into a straw man when they're... No.
The use of
there's
accusations of argumentative tactics to avoid.
There's a difference between what's the word? I'm going to say allegory, but it's not the word
I'm not sure if
looking
that's
for. When you're comparing things.
An analogy?
Analogy.
Okay.
There's a difference between analogy and straw man.
Yes.
They are closely related, but there is a difference.
People often use analogies to build straw men.
Right. There was one argument I was in, 2017-ish, give or take. And the analogy I used was, well, with that kind of thinking, then the scramble for Africa was completely justified. And that it was being accused as a straw man, which... Okay, I conceded, yeah, okay, sure, that's a straw man. And I said, no,
maybe that's a bit...
That really wasn't.
Maybe a false equivalency you could make an argument for something like that, but a straw man's something more specific than that.
An equivocation fallacy is something more specific, I'd say. That's, all men are created equal, therefore, well, women aren't men.
Right.
That's what I'd call a false equivalency, an equivocation fallagy.
Right. Well, you're proposing a proposition. That is the logical and philosophical definition of a proposition. So you're putting forth a proposition where you're assuming that the predicate is justified by the subject. I think that's right. Yeah, I mean that's essentially what you're doing.
Blank stare.
Yeah, I mean you're well, you know what you just described an equivocation fallacy, and it's the same thing. So, but yeah. So, well,
straw man would have to be the most widely used, and I'd say misunderstood tactic. And it's a fallacy. Fallacies aren't legitimate tactics, but I'd say part of it is so few people are schooled on actual rhetoric and actual logic.
And what's funny about that is when you get people that maybe read an article about logical fallacies or something, it's like when a kid learns a curse word.
Right.
You know, it's like, well, now they're just going to throw it at you. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It's like, I have a new thing that I can do.
Right,
you know?
yeah. Whether they actually understand it or not, and, reading one article does not make you an expert on, well, anything except maybe that particular article.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, depending on how many times you've read it.
Right. Yeah, I would say straw man is a big one, and again, it's only gotten worse and worse and worse. Equivocation fallacies are really, really big.
Red herrings.
Red herrings are pretty big. Red herrings are usually like a last resort for people who aren't very good at arguing.
Well, yeah, and typically...
Or a first resort for people who are even worse at arguing.
Red herrings are kind of... calling it a last resort, it's... You'll say something is a red herring, but you find out not many people actually know what a red herring is.
Yeah.
Like our moderator doesn't know what a red herring is.
Well, my understanding of red herring has always been it's basically just a semi or unrelated topic that is meant to distract you from continuing along the path of the discussion towards the actual relevant thing.
It's a Chewbacca defense.
Right. It's a distraction. It's a derailing. Mechanism. It's a derailing mechanism when you're in a conversation.
Yeah, and I've been hit by one of those pretty hard. This was shortly after Trump was elected in 2016.
They tend to be provocative.
Yeah, and I did not want to defend Trump. I didn't. He's the person in power. This is someone we're supposed to be criticizing. But then some of the criticisms were, he's using his Twitter too much, and then why aren't conservatives complaining about this?
Who was it said something to the effect of the problem with defending free speech is that you
sometimes you have to defend people who you otherwise find morally reprehensible.
Right. You have to defend
you
the
have
assholes.
To stand up for the Nazis if you're going to stand up for free speech.
Right.
Sorry, you have to do it.
Right.
They have just as much right to speak as you do. If you're following that free speech thing.
It's that line. It's
right.
Where you draw the line between free speech and, honestly, right now, hate speech, I would say. Most people can fairly reasonably draw the line at action, although that's definitely been blurred over the last year. I think a lot of people still draw that line, which is why we didn't hear about the facts of how the BLM riots were. Well, BLM protests did become riotous in the evenings in many cities. Like that, we didn't, like a lot of outlet, when we're finally starting to see places like CNN and MSNBC acknowledging that those things happened. Now that they have even more control over the narrative.
That's getting a bit more political than I want to go this
right
now.
Well, it's still somewhat related to social media because it has to do with how we absorb news and how social media is related to that. Right? I mean, most people now get their news from social media.
Yeah, and it's been that way since 2014.
What makes you say that specifically?
I was paying attention to what was being talked about on mainstream media sources in 2014 during the off-season elections. And while I was sitting there doing schoolwork with the news on, that story came up, and it's as of this year, more people get their news off social media than they get from traditional media sources.
So where do they get those? Now, traditional media does have presence on social media, but
not
are
back
they
in
making
2014.
Oh well, all right, that's fair enough. So where do you think they're getting? What are these social media news sources? Where are they coming from? Because Facebook isn't like its own news source.
Well, it'd be things like Huffington Post.
Huffing what now?
Huffington Post.
Yes, I know.
Right, I'm slurring, and I'm not even drunk. those kind of new media.
Huffington Post was a big one. Medium, I'm noticing, is a big one now. I mean,
I don't even know what that is.
Medium's an interesting one. It's kind of like Huffington Post. From what I can tell, it's still like Huffington Post. It's a general blog website where anybody can pretty much have their own little blog space and people can share it and repost it and things like that.
Right.
To this point, I don't feel like it's gotten quite as bad as Huffington Post, but a lot of people tend to criticize it for the same reasons that they criticize Huffington Post. It's like, well, who are these people, right? Like, these are bloggers? These aren't professional journalists. Although you've heard me make the argument before that we're all journalists now.
Well, that's Andrew Breitbart.
Oh, is that what he said?
That was he held up a smartphone. We're all journalists now.
Hey.
That was his big thing.
Right.
But getting back to that red herring, I don't want to defend Trump, but what you're accusing of is ridiculous.
False is false, even when it's someone you hate.
Right. And what I was talking about, the point I was trying to make during that whole exchange was, if this is how you're going to criticize anything and everything, regardless of its actual merit, and you're not even criticizing policy, when he does actually do something that is worthy of criticism, no one's going to pay attention to it.
Yeah, it's a boy who cried wolf, essentially. Yeah.
Boy who cried wolf. And I use the specific word, I use the phrase, these kinds of histrionics are not helping you. Mm-hmm. And the person who I was arguing with saw histrionic and then saw that I was a dude and then immediately accused me of being a misogynist bigot.
Right, the demographic data becomes tantamount to whatever ideas you're presenting.
So that was the red herring derailment right there. Mm-hmm. And I shouldn't have fallen for it, but I did. So, yeah. I mean, anyone listening to this has probably had some
experience along those lines.
Right.
Yeah.
None of what I've been talking about has been news to anybody.
Yeah. Well, people also like that sort of confirmation bias. Like, yeah, that's some horse shit.
Maybe I can elucidate this in a way that it makes more sense. Mm-hmm. I like to think I'm a wordsmith.
Yeah, you're pretty good.
Oh, thank you.
Pretty good. I'm better, but you're pretty good.
Your diction's terrible.
My diction?
Yeah.
My diction's terrible?
You will sometimes, use a $10 word when a $2 one will do just fine.
That's probably true, but I think it's probably along the same criticisms that you've had with Jordan Peterson when we've talked about like the precision of language and how you can get caught in the trap of trying to be so specific about what you're saying so that it cannot be mistaken that nobody can understand what you're saying.
Yeah, to use an analogy that cracked me up years ago, you can get so caught up mining for gold on a renegade asteroid.
By the time you find it, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah, I've been reading Kant recently, so I definitely understand that. Like, using $10 words when, 2-cent words will do.
Right.
That's a problem with philosophy, just in general.
Oh, God, yes.
It's funny, people talk about how dense Nietzsche is. I didn't have as much trouble with Nietzsche as I have been having with Kant, but that is a totally different conversation altogether.
Right, well.
Oh.
I've been meaning to pick up Meditations by Marcus Aurelius here soon.
But, okay, so we've been going on for quite a while. One of the prerequisites for this particular podcast was that we watch The Social Dilemma, because we knew we were going to be talking about social media. So maybe we can sort of steer, at this point, once we come back from our break shortly, what we're going to do is we're going to steer ourselves in the direction of some of the issues that were brought up in that particular documentary. And I'll actually let you lead the conversation on that one.
I have notes.
Okay, yeah, he has notes.
I took a lot of notes for that movie.
Yeah, and then we'll jump in that direction. So we'll go ahead and take a brief break.
And word from our sponsors. They're fine companies. You should buy everything they make, even the things that don't exist.
Doe, John OmniCorp Unlimited presents Doe, John Pharmaceuticals. If it's Doe, John, they're drugs. If it's Doe, John, it's our product.
All right, we're back, and we're going to jump into a new, related but fairly somewhat new topic of conversation. We recently watched A Social Dilemma, and Garrett has some notes on that, and we're going to jump into that now.
Okay, so I started taking these notes, and just as things were coming up on the screen, something that I would find interesting, I'd write down. Something I found exceptions with, I'd write down. And then try to find data as I could. So the first thing that's going to pop up is the concept of surveillance capitalism, and how the person who wrote the book on it, literally wrote the book on it, her analogy for describing what surveillance capitalism is rather flawed.
The person in The Social Dilemma.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I can't remember her name. When she came up on screen and started describing human futures.
I
started laughing at that one, just because that's not how futures markets work.
Mm-hmm.
So, if that to me seemed really misleading, considering she is a Harvard Business School former professor,
okay.
And if that's how she's describing human futures and what's going on here, and then comparing it to the futures market, either she is being very misleading or she doesn't know how a futures market works.
Or they're actually two separate issues that use some of the same terminology. That is also possible. Possible,
but when you're building an analogy like that...
No. I try to give benefits of the doubt to experts in their field, as a Harvard business, but...
Professor Emeritus.
Right.
So, yeah... The thing that I took was, okay, futures trading is a kind of stock trading that two parties, a buyer and a seller, agree to buy or sell, depending on what role they have, at a specified date in the future at an agreed upon price then.
Mm-hmm.
So, short stocks, or shorting stocks works very similar to that. It is a kind of futures trading.
Mm-hmm.
And what they were talking about was human futures. As in, they're buying... And this is part one... The analogy to me immediately breaks down. It's an equivocation fallacy. You're talking about... You're talking about trading in the future of human beings, and then making the equivocation that it is... that's helpful.
Cool.
Doo-ba-doo-ba-doo.
We're looking up the person we're discussing.
Yes.
Where's she at?
I can't see
she's on there
her.
somewhere. Hang on. Continue talking. I'll find it.
Okay, so... The equivocation fallacy is you're trading in human futures the same way they trade in pork belly futures. No, that's her.
Yeah. Shoshana Zuboff.
Shoshana Zuboff. That is an interesting name.
Yeah. So
what I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt, and she's not talking about like slave trading. She's talking about trading the future actions of humans as if they were stocks. Well, that's not what advertisers are doing. They're not, buying or selling a human action in the future based on, their predictions.
But remember, what they're talking about in that part is that a few of them mention this, is that the product is... Well, the goal is to change the consumer's behavior, right? And even then, they're not really the consumer; they're the product. They frame social media users in that way, that they are actually the product.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal is to get them to change their behavior over time, generally over as short a period of time as possible. So I think that's what she's talking about when she's talking about it's a futures It's a futures market because what they're doing is the advertisers are investing in a system which uses an algorithm that is built to change your behavior over time.
Right.
So that's what they're betting on is your actions in the future.
Yeah, and what they were focusing on in that particular section of the film was advertising. My God, advertisers are trying to change our behavior. Who knew? That's the entire point of advertising.
Well, they're
right?
not. Yeah, but they're not saying that. Ooh, that's bad. They're saying, okay, well, the method that we're using to do that is now more. The way they frame it is that it's more nefarious and more immediate now than it was before.
See, I don't know about the nefarious part. I mean, yeah, I can get behind selling and trading people's data is bad, but
again, they
in
mentioned
the license agreements, you've already given consent to it,
right? And they mentioned that that's actually not even really in the interest of the social media platform. They're not really interested in buying and selling your data. That's a means to an end.
No, they mentioned that's the end goal there, was to come up with the best algorithm to collect the best data to sell.
That's not the end of the algorithm.
They mentioned it at the very beginning, though. The algorithm is designed to do that.
Yes, but that's not the end goal of the algorithm. That's the function of the algorithm to get to the end goal, which is to get you to change your behavior so you buy things.
Well, yeah.
They say that. Like, that is it.
But it's to buy things, and if that didn't happen, if they built an algorithm that made you not buy things, then they would not be getting paid by anyone trying to advertise. So the end goal is for them to make money through advertisers by providing the best product they can to attract the most high-paying advertisers.
Well, the best product... Well, okay, so the product of the social media company
is the algorithm.
Is the algorithm that gets the ads to the relevant people, right? That's the idea. And to sort of build that algorithm as best as it possibly can, it's collecting as much of your data as it possibly can to build a model of you, a virtual model of you that it can use to then predict your future behaviors, and then match what they're going to send to you, what ads they're going to send to you based on that model. And that model gets better and better with more data about you that it absorbs. Like that's what they're getting at. So it's not that buying and selling your data is your data.
That algorithm is the product that they're selling to advertisers.
Yes, to advertisers. Yes.
So I take exception with that whole thing. If we're the product, we're not the product. The algorithm is the product they're selling. Mm-hmm. They attract us to get on these platforms by providing utility to us without us paying for it. Yes. But the algorithm is the product they produce. That is kind of the core that I took, and why I take the exception to the very first quote that pops up in my notes here, which is, if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. Mm-hmm. No, the algorithm is the product that they're selling. Right.
And the advertisers are paying for it.
Right. They're paying to reap the benefits of the algorithm.
Right.
Not selling us.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're selling our data, so in a manner they're selling us.
Now we're getting back into that identity thing. Are you the data that incorporates you, or are you something separate from that?
Okay, well,
a discussion for another time. So yeah, they're selling the algorithm, and the only way the algorithm works is if they have our attention. Mm-hmm. So those two things bundled together is the overall product, but the real product is the algorithm.
Yeah, well, remember, we're dealing with multiple industries here. The product of the social media company, their product that they're selling to the advertisers, that is the algorithm.
Right. But the algorithm is useless unless it has our attention.
Right. So what are we? That's if you're going to say we're not the product, then what are we in this equation?
What makes the product work? We're the mine that the algorithm has to dig through.
Well, let's
get the golden nuggets of data that they need.
Let's think about this sort of as a transitive property, right? So we can say that the algorithm is the product, but are we mixing that up? Because we could say that we are the product and the algorithm is how they get to us.
No, because we come to these things.
What the advertiser wants is us.
Well, it wants our money. They probably don't particularly care about us.
Well, no,
they care about what's in our wallet.
Mm-hmm.
So
the product that is the product that the advertisers are after. I think that's what we're not. I think that's the little element we're not really thinking about. Is what are the advertisers after? Whatever the advertisers are after is the product that is the actual product that the social media companies offer. So they're saying that they offer the algorithm, but that's really a means to an end to give the advertisers what they want. Because the advertisers don't want the algorithm in and of itself. They want something that the algorithm provides. So what is the algorithm providing them?
Sales for their product. But why I'm saying the algorithm is the product is this whole thing is talking about the social media companies, right? What are they producing? They're producing the algorithm.
Yeah.
So the advertisers, their product is something else that they want us to buy.
Right.
So when I'm saying the product is the algorithm, I'm talking specifically about the product of the social media companies.
Right. You could say that, but
those advertisers, their product, they have their own customers. What they are producing is, well, probably exposure to us.
Well, yeah,
of other people's products.
What I'm saying is that if you say that the algorithm is the product, I think you're stopping short of, like, you're not going far enough with what the actual product is. Because the algorithm is a means to get to something. What we got to do is we got to define.
Yeah, the algorithm is a means to get to money.
Right.
For
so
them.
Then the
for
money.
The social media companies.
Yes, but then the money is, well, not for the social media companies necessarily. The advertisers are who are paying the social media companies. The advertisers are the actual ultimate consumers here. Right? There's this listen.
This is a very interconnected system. There's no real
I'm going to forget my line of thought.
But if I'm selling, I don't know, T-shirts, right? My product is T-shirts. Why am I selling the T-shirts? To get your money. I want you to buy the T-shirt. So the end goal of the product is money for me. The end product for the advertisers is money from the people they are advertising for. The end product for the people they are advertising for is, well, money from people buying their products.
I'm still trying to make sure that I keep my train of thought because I was getting to something. This is a unique situation where trying to define what the product is challenging because you can say that the algorithm is the product that the social media companies are selling to the advertisers. Mm-hmm. You could say that, but it doesn't go far enough.
Why doesn't it go far enough?
I mentioned this because the algorithm is a tool to get to something else. Right? The relationship isn't that the companies, the advertisers are trying to get the algorithm. Like that's not that they're not like we need this algorithm. That's not what they're doing. They're saying we need the attention of the consumers because we want to sell them things. We want their money. Mm-hmm. That is what they want. That is that is the end of that. It's the money. So the money in its own way, is the product that the advertisers are after. All right, that's what they're going for. They don't want the algorithm. The algorithm is a means to get the money. It's the middleman. It's not the product.
No, the advertisers are the middleman. They're another middleman. Because when you buy a product, you're not paying the advertiser. You're paying the producer of the product.
Okay, we're framing this wrong then because we're looking at this like there's somebody at the top, there's somebody at the bottom, and it's not. It's this circular thing. So where we can't say where we can't say the product. And what's funny is not once have we tried to make the case that the product is the thing that the advertisers are selling. Why do you think that might be?
Run it by me again.
The one thing we have not defined as the product is the thing that the advertisers are trying to sell us.
Well, yeah, that's a lot of different things.
Well, no, you can still use it as an abstract. It doesn't matter what the advertiser is. They have something they're trying to sell us, and that thing traditionally is the product. But we haven't even mentioned that as the product in this situation.
See, I think where we broke down was We started with what is the product that the social media companies are selling, right? Because the quote at the start of the whole movie was, if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product.
Okay.
So that's what I was addressing. We're getting, Google, Facebook, we're not paying for these. So the implication is we are the product of that quote. And I'm saying I don't agree with that. I don't think that's true. Because the product of the social media companies is the algorithm that only works if we engage with it.
Well, I think that's too simple. I think the case that they're making is that hopefully this isn't getting too complicated. The case that they're making is that the model of us that the algorithm creates is the product, and pragmatically that makes us the product. As a matter of practicality, of logical practicality, that does make us the product.
Then we get back into that identity thing.
Well, that's why I'm specifically qualifying it as a matter of practicality. We are the product, because they're building something that is representative of us, and that is what the advertisers are using. Pragmatically, that's what they're after, because pragmatically that defines for them directly what we're likely to do, what we're likely to purchase. It's a prediction model, right? So pragmatically, it's us for the purposes of the advertisers. It's us, and it works that way. It actually functions that way. Functionally, from the perspective of the advertisers, that model that is being built from the social media algorithms is us. And it's predictably us. That's what makes the algorithm work. If it weren't predictably us, the algorithm would be worthless and advertisers wouldn't care about it.
Well, I'm getting to that. That was my next thing. So, the next thing that the Harvard professor spoke about was what they're selling is certainty. So you're talking about advertising that is 100% effective. The numbers don't bear that out. I had time to look this up. On average, the number of click-throughs that you actually get on Facebook advertising is 0.9% in 2017.
Mm-hmm. But clicks aren't the only. We talked about this a little bit earlier off recording, but the actual number of clicks on an advertisement are not equal to are not 1-to-1 equal to how effective the ads are. Because a lot of people are wary about clicking on an ad, but they'll still see the ad and take an interest in the product. And they won't click on the ad because they don't want to get more ads, right? They don't want to. What's the right word? Encourage that sort of
they don't
behavior.
Want to tell the algorithm to send me more of this,
right? Even though it's technically in their interest to do that.
As a side note, to help out a YouTube creator that I like, he said, "Hey, click the link. It helps me out." So I clicked the link to Raycon, and for the next month, I got nothing but Raycon advertisements. Mm-hmm. I'm never doing that again. But it's still the claim that advertising that is 100% effective.
Well, it's
she said they are selling certainty.
I think you're being nitpicky on that. When she says they're selling certainty, I think any reasonable person would say, okay, well, what they're selling is the closest thing to certainty that they can manage that's worked better than things.
She said it was perfect. Her words. In the space of 10 seconds, they are selling certainty. It is a perfect system. Maybe she should pick her words better, but when you're talking about this kind of thing in a documentary that is clearly pushing something.
What should she have said then?
It is more effective than traditional advertising methods.
So you don't think the average? So you don't think the average person would assume? Because that's what I assumed from what she said. I did not literally take her words that it is a perfect system. I didn't take that literally. I know what she means when she says that.
I'm going to take what she said as she said it. And she kept expounding on those were her building blocks.
How difficult would it be to get through that entire documentary if we took absolutely everything that everyone in that documentary, or any documentary, said at perfect one-to-one literal value?
Okay, so what does it's a perfect system mean then?
Be reasonable.
I'm trying to be reasonable here. When you say it's a perfect system, I hope you mean, and you have so much time to actually say what you mean. Come on.
It's an absolute, and most people don't take absolutes absolutely. It's a figure to mean we've done something damn near the closest thing to a perfect. Well, see, we go back to that. We go back to that idea that you had. Well, why you're using a $10 word when a $1 word would work. It's like she's using a $1 word instead of going in and saying, well, we have the absolute closest thing to a perfect system that we could ever possibly. No, it's like we came up with a perfect system, because she knows that when people hear her say that, she's not actually looking at this thing as a flawless system, right? And I'm to be entirely honest, I'm a little unhappy that we're spending this much time on this. But I think it's unreasonable to take that particular quote at one-to-one literal face value. All right, we'll jump back to that. We're going to go into another word from our sponsors.
Speaking of advertising.
Yes.
Doe, John, OmniCorp Unlimited presents Doe, John Apparel. If it's Doe, John, it covers you. If it's Doe, John, it's our product.
All right, we're back. We're going to start moving on to Garrett's next grievance with the Social Dilemma film.
So, piggybacking off that, I believe, false assertion that this is a perfect system, there are serious flaws in that. The algorithm can't force you to click anything. It can't force you to take a particular action. You're going to make the argument of soft power, but still, they can't even force you to go, or can't even really incentivize you to click on the ad more than 1% of the time, they're probably not as effective, because that's what they want you to do, is click the ad, go buy the product.
Well, that's the best case scenario. That isn't the only thing, that isn't their only goal. That's the best case scenario. What they want to do...
What they're pushing you towards is that best case scenario.
Right, but what they want you to do is see the ad. They don't necessarily need you to click that ad, as long as what the ad is doing is making you want to look into and preferably purchase the thing.
Well, then in that case,
the ultimate goal is to get you to buy the thing, not to get you to click the ad.
Then in that case, it's the same thing as any other advertising throughout history.
Is it? Do we have the numbers on how effective advertising in other mediums has worked? Because that's what you would want to do. You would want to compare.
If the goal is simply to get the thing in front of you, that's every other advertising throughout history. You didn't need an algorithm for it.
But the algorithm's important, because what the algorithm does is it pinpoints the types of people who would be most likely to buy your product. That's why it's so valuable to the advertisers. That's why that model is so valuable to the advertisers.
Yeah, but as I said earlier, they're trying to push us to the best case scenario, which is we see the ad, we click the link, we go buy the product. Right there.
Buy the product. That's the thing you've got to remember. Buy the product. That is the end goal.
Yeah, but the best case scenario that they want is to click the link, buy the product when you see the ad. And they can't even get that 1% of the time. So I don't think it's as effective as...
I think you're focusing too much on the click. Like, that is best case scenario. They're hoping that you do, but not really expecting that any more than 0.9% of people do it. All they care about is that you are the relevant audience and that you see the ad. If you click the ad, that's almost kind of like a bonus.
And we're saying the same thing over and over again. I've got a long list, bud. So that's my piece on that one.
Dodge.
Well, I can't... You want me to keep saying the same thing?
Continue.
All right. The other thing is you've got a vast array of advertisers competing for their attention. It's not one competing for your attention. It's not just... one conglomerate thing that, okay, these are all the advertisers, they all have the same will. As it is kind of presented there. These advertisers are competing with each other as much as they're competing for your attention.
I never got the sense that they were trying to sort of make the advertising industry seem like some sort of hive mind where there's a top. I never got that.
I got that vibe. I got that vibe. Okay, another, and this is probably a nitpick, but the idea that he said when bicycles came out, no one complained. Oh God, every new technology has some sort of moral panic to it. With bicycles, it was, oh no, women have mobility on their own. It's ruining the family life. They're not at home taking care of the kids as they should be. And the seats that they're riding on could be hitting their gonads and ruining their ability to make more children. That was a thing that happened.
Yeah. Same
with sofas. Sofas were considered a how did I phrase this? Yeah, it was considered scandalous. You mean men and women can sit next to each other? They might be having sex on the damn things now.
They weren't wrong.
No, they weren't wrong, but it didn't lead to complete moral collapse of a society. That's what they were going for with those outrages. I mean, radio came along, the printing press. Oh my God.
Mm. Okay,
I'm going with this.
Here's the thing with that: it's true, but it is nitpicky.
Yeah, it's
nitpicky. Not really related to the social media issue.
But
it's true, but irrelevant.
He based an argument off that this has never happened before.
Well, what was his argument?
That this level of technological progress has never happened before, or we've not had this kind of exposure. It's like, yeah,
his argument is true. His analogy is stretching it.
Yeah.
So pragmatically, it doesn't really matter that much.
This is one that I did agree with. Curated information in the online spaces. Yeah, that is a problem. You have, well, for instance, Twitter recently booting, what was it, 500,000 people off because they didn't have the correct opinion. Mm-hmm. That's pretty messed up.
Yeah, and I actually agree with you, but there's a lot of people don't actually get into the nitty-gritty of why that's actually an issue, because a lot of people, it's one of those circumstantial things where, well, if you agree with it, then you have an excuse. If you don't agree with it, then you have a different excuse.
Well, if you don't agree with it, you have wrong think.
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, so when all those people got booted off Twitter, when Trump got, booted off Twitter and they took down Parler and all that, everybody on the left were, well, not everybody, but but you know what I mean. They were saying, oh, well, these are private companies. They should be able to do what they want to do. Isn't that what conservatives like? It's like, yeah, okay.
My answer to that one is, yes, I'm glad you agree with me. Now, can we have the bakers not bake cakes for gay weddings?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. And that you do run into that a lot, where it's like, okay, they're saying that they are having this argument, and we once thought that this argument was true, so what's the problem? It's like, well, then we agree. Why are you making this a disagreement?
Right.
That just sort of completely slips their mind. But that's actually sort of secondary to the point that I was trying to make, which is shit. Hang on, I'll get back to it. I hope, because it was a good point.
Well, in the meantime, the problem is you got censoring of ideas instead of...
Right. Okay, so what I was getting at is the definition of what a social media platform is, right? And platform is the important word there, right? I think we probably had these tertiary discussions about this, where if a social media platform, let's say Facebook, if Facebook is letting everybody say whatever they want and they're not censoring anyone for any particular reason, then they are a platform.
Right.
Right? And, well, we'll say this. But if they decide that they're going to start getting into the censorship game.
Editorializing, in essence.
In essence, to an extent, but they become a publisher.
Right.
Once there becomes a management within the social media company that decides that certain content on their platform is preferable to other content. You become a publisher. You're no longer just a platform. And that's where a lot of people, particularly on the left at the moment, given these particular circumstances, these things tend to swap depending on what the situation is. You've got to make that distinction. Because the distinction that you make is going to depend on what sort of regulations are reasonable for those types of things. I think a lot of people who are on the right at the moment, or in the center at the moment, want these social media companies to remain platforms. Where a lot of people on the left are saying, no, they have a moral responsibility to curate the content of what's on the platform. But if they do that, they cease to be a platform and they become a publisher. And therefore they are subject to regulations that publishers are subject to.
Okay, so
my issue is that I actually don't know what those regulations are. I haven't
right.
looked into
And what's often brought up is Section 230. Right? Mm-hmm. Kat, could you come up with the precise wording of Section 230 for me? There really isn't much of a legal distinction between a platform and a publisher as far as Section 230 is concerned. The actual wording of it will make this readily apparent as soon as she can pull it up. Mm. You can read it. Okay. Nope, she's being shy. Section 230. This
looks like the kind of handout I would have gotten at work about like safety.
This is not the best source.
See, this is one of the things about the Arbitrarium that does make it a bit difficult, is that we don't plan exactly what we're going to talk about. We just have a general idea, and so we don't know what we're going to need to fact check
this is
at any given point.
Yeah. There we go. That's an ad, that's an ad.
Hey, speaking of ads.
Okay.
Yeah, well, actually, you know what? I want to make sure that I don't forget to talk about the... what's nice is I can just edit this whole pause out.
Okay, here it is.
Okay.
No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider.
Explain it to me like I'm 5.
Okay. Basically,
I read Kant and I'm struggling with this.
Basically what that means is if I have a website, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I let anyone post on it. And you decide you're going to post something on it. And this just so happens to be illegal.
Okay.
I'm not held liable for your post.
Right.
That's all Section 230 means. That's it. Okay. So...
even as a publisher, or is that just for...
That is the entire thing. There is no legal distinction between publisher or platform. None. That is the entire wording.
Okay. I'm actually okay with that.
Yeah, so...
look, that's reasonable to me.
So what you're talking about with revising Section 230 is making a legal distinction between them.
Okay. Do we need to do that?
I don't fucking know. Bleep that, please. So I'm not a legal scholar on that.
Right.
And I'm not going to pretend to be the end arbiter of all truth.
Well, before we end this, because I don't know how much longer we're going to be going on, I do want to jump to something different, because I wanted to talk a little bit about this.
Let me just rapid fire some of my notes here. The big ones are at the start.
Okay.
Okay, so it seems the big problem that they kept running into with the positive was the big problem underlying everything was trying to make people better. You're not going to run into that. You can't algorithm your way out of that. People are going to be shitty to each other, period.
I feel like it's not so much that they want to make people better. I mean, that would be a nice benefit. It sounded more like they were trying to keep people from being worse. it seemed like it was way more about keeping people from being worse than making people better. Like, the hope is that people would be better as a result of what they've made.
Well, the like button, the entire idea was to bring more positivity into the world. That's trying to make people better in my book.
Yeah, but
we can disagree on that. But
the whole thing wasn't about that. Come on.
Okay. I'm going to ignore that one. Okay, one of the timelines they brought up, or one of the graphs was teenage girl self-harm, teenage girl suicide, right?
Yes.
And they drew the line right in 2009, which I think they're equating
the line just said social
correlation
media
and causation, and something that I think probably had a bigger impact on that was the Great Recession, where everyone's parents are losing their jobs and losing their homes. Probably had more of an effect than social media companies. That's
on preteens.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge family stressor. And even then, the numbers, if you actually looked at what they were talking about, they really weren't that high anyway to begin with. I'm not saying that, a teenage girl killing herself isn't a terrible thing, but looking at the graph that they made,
I mean, there was a pretty stark increase. I'll get like that.
And another thing that
the causes of it, I could see being up for debate, but
and another thing that I noticed while looking at that graph was you had a squiggly line, and then in 2008 it starts to spike, and then they draw the line 2009 social media. Then it keeps going up.
Thanks, Obama.
So I'm going with the 2008 recession instead of social media, because that's where you start to see the rise. That changed my mind. Okay.
My only concern, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but you're very well aware that this is my primary concern with you, with Nick particularly, and with some others, is that we want to make sure that we're sort of keeping the contrarianism in check.
Right. Which is why I'm skipping past some of these that are like, meh. One that I did agree with, digital pacifier, that's fair. That's describing a phone as a digital pacifier.
Oh, if you tried to deny that, I would have slapped you in the face.
I'm not denying that one. I have something here that is just behavior and culture does. I think I was getting with how do we adapt to... Oh, he said something along the lines of our brains are 3 million or millions of years old, and yet we're being presented with...
we're not evolved to handle the amount, like the volume of judgment that's coming at us.
Right.
And I agree with that.
I half agree with that.
That's reasonable.
But
it's a hell of a statement.
It's like, to put it in computer terms, okay, we're rolling with a state-of-the-art computer circa 1999. But
Wolfenstein. Okay,
you can still keep... I mean, the bigger thing than the hardware is the software updates. That's what culture is. It's the software that keeps us running in the environment we find ourselves in. So the question is not whether or not our brain are evolved enough to handle it. It's whether or not the software can cope with what's going on. That's still up in the air, which is why I'm
not sure I understand the difference between what you're saying and what he said.
Okay, he was saying that the problem is the hardware, the brain. Yeah. I'm saying that it might not be the problem. It might be the software hasn't caught up to where we are now.
Well, no, I think because remember he actually addressed exactly what you just said. I don't think he's saying that it's the hardware. I think he is saying that it's the software. But I think he's saying that's
I mean culture and behavior of humans.
Oh, no,
that's what I'm saying.
I think psychologically, the case he is saying is that we are not we did not evolve to psychologically handle this amount of judgment and pressure from every angle as quickly as it hit us. And remember, he addressed shortly thereafter the idea that, oh, well, maybe we just haven't, like, we're going to get used to it, like we're going to adapt to that. And I don't remember exactly what his response to that was, but I know it was questionable. I think what it ended up being is questioning, like, well, yeah, but it's happening so fast that are we going to catch up to it before it destroys us?
I remember reading something years ago. It was a Cracked article back when Cracked was still good, talking about how we've been within 2 or 3 months of a new advertising format coming out. We adapt our reading behaviors faster, or remarkably quickly. And the way that they were studying this was eye movement. They'd ask people to just read the internet, and they'd watch their eye movement. And they did this over the course of a few different months, trying out a few different advertising formats. And what they found was, after about a month, people would, oh, that's going to be an ad. So they just immediately skip it without even looking at it.
Yeah.
So
I know I do that.
Yeah, most people do. You never click on the first Google result.
No.
You probably don't even read it.
It actually says ad, and if it says ad, I don't click on it.
I'll click on it if it's...
Even though it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because if I click on something that doesn't say ad, it's still pragmatically, as far as the way that the system works, the algorithm, it's still an ad.
I'll click on the ad if it's what I'm actually looking for. And that's something else. Advertisers, just because they're trying to sell you something doesn't mean they're not trying to help you.
That's true. Oh, well, I was actually talking to Britt the other day. I said, look, if I'm going to see ads, I actually would prefer that they are relevant ads, like things that I would actually be interested in, because I know ads are inevitable. Like, I don't see. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but I don't see a future where ads aren't there. And I never really had that much of a problem with ads, as long as the volume isn't too high.
Yeah.
That's the thing that gets me.
I mean, advertising is about as old as civilization.
Okay, I was going to say, I actually wasn't referencing literal volume, but at the same, that's also a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hate that too.
So, moving on from there. Oh, something, just a question, and we don't even need to explore this much, but how am I playing against Facebook?
What do you mean, how you playing against?
So he was talking about, there's a game that, Facebook or whatever, the social media companies have these algorithms, and then all you really know about the algorithm is that they have, or about the site is they have memes and cat posts. You're not playing, it's not a fair playing field. How am I playing against them?
Well, the idea, the hope is that you wouldn't. That the algorithm is built in such a way that you actually have sort of a symbiotic relationship with it. But that's the argument that they're making, is that that's not exactly the case. I mean, there is certainly a symbiotic relationship with that algorithm, but they're arguing that the detriment, the psychological detriment of that relationship with the algorithm is actually far outweighs the positives right now, and they're trying to reverse that trend without destroying what they've built that they do think can be very, very good and has proven to be very, very good.
Yeah. Another thing, during Tristan's big presentation that he was giving.
Which one?
The one towards the end where it's the whole...
Okay, yeah.
He's talking about, when technology overcomes human strengths, but what we need is when technology overcomes human weaknesses. That's the entire point of technology.
Yes,
I mean,
but then you got to differentiate.
If you really want an example of this, go chop woods with your hands.
Right, but again, you got to make that distinction between symbiotic relationship to technology and parasitic relationship to technology,
or outright adversarial. But it's a problem with the phrasing, maybe.
We got 1 minute, and after that minute, we're going to the thing I want to talk about.
Technology is built to overcome human weakness. That's what it's for.
Right.
Also, only bad magicians use that method. Oh, the card thing. They know what card you're going to... Bad magicians use that one. Penn and Teller talk about that. Good magicians know what card you've taken, regardless of which one, because they know the deck.
Right.
Also, getting on to, messages being spread. Just because it's spread doesn't mean it's accepted.
Yeah,
because a lot of those
true.
flat Earth things that they kept bringing up were. That's like, look what these crazy fucks are doing.
Most people
again
are
edit that out.
I'm just gonna bleep it because I like the bleep.
I like the bleep too.
I prefer the bleep.
Do you want to bleep a snowman? Let me get through just a little bit more of this. Okay, one of the
choose your battles.
Yeah, I'm running through there. Yeah, towards the end they were talking about we need to build technology that we know will make the world better. Isn't that what created the like button? It's that very thinking that we can make the world better, and we can engineer the world to be better through these things. That's what created the like button, and then the knock-on effect there created the depression.
Yeah, but you're also having an issue there with, okay, well, what are you saying? Should we not try to make the world better because we're going to be, or should we learn from the lessons? Because it sounds like what they're saying is we need to learn from the things that we've done so that we don't do that again.
Well, it seems to me that they're trying to not make the same mistake, and they're instead making all new ones based on the same principle.
Don't use my favorite quote against me.
I am. You can't stop me. So that's.
But the hope is that they're whatever mistakes they make in the future will be less severe than the ones they've made in the past. I think the goal of trying to do better is a good one to have, rather than
right.
in
And
tandem with let's at least not do worse.
They and I have a very different idea what makes the world better. Stop trying to curate. Let people make asses of themselves.
Right. Give them enough rope to hang themselves with. That's the benefit of an open platform.
Yeah, and they're I didn't write this down, but the big radicalization thing of the extreme centrists, that's not how that happens.
No,
I don't think anyone believes that's how that happens.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say using the centrists. Like, well, we know why they did that. They didn't look like they were choosing sides.
I don't care about that.
All right. We got to do one more break for our advertisers. Then we're going to have one more brief discussion about something that I would like to talk about in relation to social media. But now we're going to go to a word from our sponsors. Here they go.
Sean Connery for Soylent Silver.
Getting old is fucking terrible. Feeling old is even worse. Aging doesn't mean you have to slow down, but it may mean you have to cannibalize your nutrients to respond to your body's newly developed thirst for flesh. Soylent Silver is made with high-quality ingredients and all the essential meats and sinews to keep your aging carcass healthy and protected. But don't take my word for it. If you don't trust me, listen to my good friend, Jimmy Stewart. Wait a minute, where am I? What is this place? Thanks, Jimmy. Soylent Silver's dietary morticians are highly qualified undertakers of elderly nutrition, and I personally guarantee your satisfaction with minimal risk of prions disease. Soylent Silver, it's what I'll be having for the rest of my life, and beyond.
Okay, so we're coming back, and I actually want to kind of turn our attention to something a little bit different about social media. I want to talk about how social media has affected our social skills. I want to talk about that because I don't hear a lot of people talking about that, but I've noticed it, at least in myself, and I think a lot of people, I think we kind of have danced around it, right, with how we talk about the way that Gen Z interacts with each other, the sort of boomer complaints that they're always on their phones and they don't know how to talk to each other. That's a common boomer complaint. So I want to talk about how social media may or may not have sort of retarded our ability to respond in, this is ironic, respond quickly and to create and craft retorts to responses. So you and I are just having a conversation, right? So we just sit here and we talk back and forth. How much has social media affected our ability to process information and then immediately respond to it instead of giving, like with social media, we have time to sit there and think for as long as we need to craft the perfect response, right? Mm-hmm. How much has that ability, having access to that amount of time, slowed down our conversational reaction time, our ability to craft a response in real time and respond in real time?
I don't know. We've, as a culture, we've always appreciated those who can respond quickly. Having the quick wit has always been something that we've held in esteem. Mm-hmm. Groucho Marx wouldn't have been as renowned as he is if everyone had that capability with no social media around.
Groucho Marx was also literally addicted to reading.
Right. But I don't know. I have noticed that teaching younger people that they tend to require a bit more to actually engage. Mm-hmm. But I've not found them in any way kind of thinking, or not being able to respond to something. And from where I'm standing, they take just as much time to respond in a social situation as, say, I would. Mm-hmm. We grew up primarily without any kind of social media. That really didn't start to hit until we were in our teenage years. Mm-hmm. And even then, it was still in its nascent form.
Right. I was going to say a concern might be that, that they are, at a certain age, they need to be able to socialize properly, I guess, for lack of better words, properly. But then again, at the age that it's most important to learn how to socialize properly, they're not developed enough to even use social media. I mean, kids need to start being socialized really with their parents, at least, obviously immediately, but with other children usually no later than the age of 2. And I know by the age of 4, if they aren't able to get along with other children, it's a good indicator that they're going to have trouble getting along with other people for the rest of their lives.
I know you probably meant something different than properly. But proper interaction, that's from where I'm standing, that's kind of loaded.
What I mean by proper is that I think a big criteria for what proper socialization would be is how well a person can negotiate with people around them.
Right.
Right. How well they can manage at least one social interaction at a time. Right. How quickly they can absorb information from a direct source, somebody they're talking directly to, and critically evaluate it and then respond to it.
Right.
Now that's higher order functions than the level of child socialization, but when it comes to child socialization, negotiation is the biggest part of that. It's like, okay, well, maybe I want something. Maybe I'm a 6-year-old, right? And I know that I want something, but in order to get that thing, I might have to deal with another kid. Mm-hmm. If I'm on the playground at that point, like maybe my parents have taken me to a park and they take me to that park consistently, so I've started to get to know the other children. And maybe I want to use the swing, but there are the same 2 or 3 kids that are always using the swings. Maybe there are only 2 swings, right? And there are already 2 kids on it. And they're always there before I do, before I get there. They're always there before I get there, and they're on the swings.
There's a scarcity of swings.
Right, there's a scarcity of swings. So I've got to be able to find a way to communicate with these kids so that I can use the swing as well. I've got to offer them something that they want in order to barter for swing time. And that would be part of my ability to socialize as a child at that point, but then again later as an adult.
Okay. I was going to say that proper socialization and proper interaction, that there's a lot that goes into that. And part of it is societal and cultural, because and then there's also the hierarchical differences with whom you're speaking. Mm-hmm. If you're a 6-year-old kid on the playground who wants to have swing time, and there's a 10-year-old kid, just by sheer physical force, he's going to be higher up in the hierarchy.
Not necessarily. Depends on whether or not he's willing to use that force.
Just having it is enough to put you higher, I'd say, because then you get to choose whether or not the other kid doesn't have the choice. If you're picking up what I'm saying here,
I know what you're saying, but I'm reticent to acknowledge the idea that might makes right.
I'm not saying that might makes right. I'm saying that
in that situation, what you're boiling it down to is that he has the might, and so he's going to get what he wants.
Well, he has the capability to demand it and force it there. That's
a euphemism.
It doesn't make it right, but it does mean that you have the power in that situation.
Right.
I'm not making the might makes right argument.
You're not making a moral judgment here.
Right.
So
that in and of itself is going to change how you're going to negotiate that situation. Just because you are speaking to someone higher up in the hierarchy. You speaking to the boss of your company, it's going to have that same kind of dynamic to it.
The reason that I would say that idea, with children it might be more relevant. So I'll give you that. But once you get into the adult world, what I would say is that the reason I would question the, for lack of better words and for the sake of simplification, that might makes right. The reason I would say that is questionable is that intelligence is a better predictor of success than physical strength, physical capabilities.
Later on in life.
Yeah. Well, not even that much later on in life, though. I would say once you get to... You could probably make an argument that once you get to your teen years, but certainly once you get to your 20s and 30s, once you're getting into the workforce, because not that much of the workforce requires brute strength in favor of intelligence.
Well, yeah. Nowadays. Excuse me.
You kind of need to at least have a little bit of both. If you're going to have a lot of brute strength, you need to at least be somewhat intelligent if you're going to succeed beyond a certain point.
If for no reason, then you need to be directable.
Right. Right. Sociable. You need to be able to socialize.
Right.
It's hard to be in the workforce if you aren't properly socialized.
Depending on what work you decide to go into, or what work you can do.
Pragmatically, I'd say most work requires that to some extent.
I'm not
Not all. I mean, there are certainly jobs where if you know that you're not a particularly agreeable person, maybe you're particularly disagreeable, then maybe it's better for you to
go count caribou in Alaska in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, something where you don't have to deal with other people, but you're still useful.
Don't need very many social skills for that job.
Right. Till you run into that elusive talking moose.
Hey, Rocky, you pull a bunny out of my hat.
So you, in your experience, you haven't noticed a difference in the ability for younger generations to socialize at a different rate than...
An ability, no.
Okay.
If you want to throw rate on there, yeah, but that's only because it can be a bit harder for them to take the risk of speaking.
That I could see. That's an important distinction.
But once they start speaking, and then depending on how you respond to them, then they can go along like anyone else. Something
So they require. Would you say that they require acceptance from the target of their speech? If they're talking to someone, then they require some level of acceptance before they're willing to go before they're willing to open themselves up, even moderately.
I wouldn't even go as far as acceptance. I'd say tolerance.
Okay, so they need to feel like what they're about to say, or they themselves are going to be at minimum tolerated before they're willing to open up.
Right.
That seems fairly normal to me, but then again, I guess it depends on degree.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because I know you're the person that's like, I don't care if you're willing to tolerate me for the most part. If you're going to get into a conversation with me, I'm going to tell you what I think.
Right. Well, at same levels on the hierarchy, we'll go with that.
Yeah.
Or if I'm not even in your hierarchy, I don't give a fuck.
You don't believe in social leagues?
No. No, not really. But when I say a bit, I mean a bit.
Mm.
And
Negligible.
I wouldn't say it's negligible, but it's not drastic in any sense of the word.
Well, sounds like then, at the very least, we could probably agree that it's at minimum correctable.
Right.
Okay. That's a good thing.
I think one thing that some people would overlook is, yes, they're communicating via text, but the volume of communication that they are doing, if you're gonna text that much, you're gonna get faster at it. Meaning you're gonna be able to formulate sentences faster in your head because you still got to type them out. Yeah, they might not be perfect, and you have the time to craft them if you so need it. But
why would you not take that time if you had it, though?
I mean, I guess if you might not need it. You might not need the time if you can.
That would be nice.
If you can already formulate what you want to say that fast.
But my concern is that you lose the imperative to formulate it quickly, so you lose the stress that builds the skill to formulate it quickly.
I see where you're coming from.
I'm not saying it's true, but that would be. I mean, that's a legitimate concern.
I don't think it's that much of a concern just because of the volume of communication that they are doing and the number of different people that they would be communicating with or that they are communicating with via these platforms, via text messaging, via instant messengers. They're doing a lot more communication at an earlier age than we did. That right there is going to, I think, set them up a bit. It's going to be different, but I also think it might be a bit better. Because when you're trying to juggle that many different communication lines that fast, yeah, you theoretically have all the time in the world to formulate and craft the perfect response, but
you've also had all the time in the world to learn from those things. So, okay, maybe a reasonable conclusion for the time being for that would be the quality of communication. It's possible that the quality of communication has actually gotten better, but the pace of it has deteriorated to a certain extent.
Maybe.
It's hard to really kind of frame that properly. I can see how the quality of information would actually improve because they have the ability to communicate at any moment.
Well, having read some text messages that I've received from some of my students,
maybe not so much.
I think the volume's gone up, sure.
Okay.
Maybe not the quality.
Okay.
But I also have a different idea of what makes quality communication.
I think we're both a little bit biased when it comes to what good quality communication is.
We were raised when punctuation and grammar meant something.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, as long as the gist,
we understand it, it's a pragmatic approach to communication.
Which I can't fault them there. If it gets the point across, the communication has been successfully done. But there are nuances that proper punctuation help with.
I'm with you.
And don't forget that Oxford fucking comma.
I definitely understand. I'm a writer and a pragmatist, so on that particular topic, I go back and forth, and sometimes I want to jam a knife in my own chest.
I love that Oxford comma. I need it.
Me too. It's like, oh God, as a pragmatist, you're right. As long as the idea gets across, that's all that matters. But then there's the etiquette that actually does matter. Like, I can read it better.
Mm-hmm.
There's nuance that you lose when you don't actually adhere to at least the general rules of communication through literature or through speech. Although there's speech and grammar are kind of weird. I have a weird relationship. But you get what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can hear a comma when you're speaking.
I'm picking up the generalities of what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. I love the comma in speech. I use it often.
If they could distill Oxford comma into a drug, I want it right into my veins and into the veins of everyone around me.
Well, we've got a few minutes left. I think we were going to try to tackle
why I came back.
Why you came back and hasn't been good.
So, why I came back partly was because of this podcast. Because being on Facebook again allows me to, hey, this is something that I've made. It allows me to immediately share it to people who would probably be more interested than the general population. So, marketing. I've only been back for a week, and I can already tell that I'm falling into some of those old habits that I hated.
Oh, I've noticed.
Where I'll start just kind of scrolling through Facebook
I was going to
endlessly.
say, I think it took you all of 3 days to comment on one of my posts, like, yeah, but...
Well, yeah.
But...
In that situation, though, if you were to say that in front of me, I'd have said the same damn thing.
That is very true.
I do kind of prefer doing that because I do have that time to craft what I'm about to say and really read through it again, proofread it, where I can't do that when I'm speaking.
Yeah.
I also think that my tone on text is better than how my voice sounds. So...
I disagree. I think the exact opposite is true.
Oh, well, thanks.
And see categories too.
I don't know.
With you, inflection is important.
When I'm typing something out, it's easier for me to fill it with I don't know, moral certitude.
You are assertive.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why you came back.
Has it been good?
It hasn't been good.
It's only been a week, so that's hard to judge, but...
Right. Do you think you'll be able to stave off the bad habits?
Maybe. I'm hoping so.
I didn't leave, and I've done okay. I actually have gotten better about not getting overtly frustrated with people who disagree with me, because I don't have a problem with people who disagree with me. You know this. I have a problem with the manner in which they choose to present their disagreement.
Right. I have noticed that being off Facebook for 2.5 years and then coming back is really kind of weird. Because I've changed a lot over 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But that profile is still locked in place. It's still frozen. Which, So it doesn't even, like, for instance, it doesn't even have my favorite band on there. I'm going to have to go in and actually add Sabaton to it.
That is the one benefit of liking the Dave Matthews Band, is I can find that real easy anywhere I go.
Well, I can find Sabaton on. I can type it into, hey, bands I like, and get a little the bio thing. I just haven't gotten around to it, and I doubt I ever will, because my coming back to Facebook, I actually came back to it with a goal,
right?
Instead of just pick up a date or whatever I was doing before. I'm actually not coming back to have arguments. I'm coming back to, hey, I found this this bill. This is my response to it that I sent to my congressman. I want you guys to read it. I want to market my creations, such as this podcast.
Right.
So that's the mission. I have a mission now, instead of just playing around with it and using it to waste my time.
That's gone pretty well so far. I mean, this may not be the order in which we play them, but this is only the second podcast we've recorded. So, and I think we both kind of came to the conclusion that we're feeling pretty good about this one. I'm hoping it didn't start out too slow, because we did a lot of standard interview stuff, which I think, no offense to you, is more interesting to the general public when it's someone they know.
Right.
But we'll see how it plays out. But I think that's going to...
I gave you bastards all I had.
I think that's going to conclude our time. We've been running a pretty good clip. So that is the end of the Arbitrarium episode. Social media. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.